So welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, November 15th. It's just, I don't know if anybody else is having this problem, but I am really having trouble kind of recognizing that we are in the middle of November already. Somehow my head is still in the summer, which is not good. So, we're going to take a few minutes to simply breathe together and settle in our seats. So I invite you to sit comfortably and notice your inhale and your exhale. Allow yourself to feel really supported where you're sitting. As we arrive. So we carve out this time for ourselves to really be together and to be with ourselves. It's a gift. So this week's Parsha is Chaya Sarah. And it's really interesting because that means the life of Sarah, and the Parsha starts with her death. But that's a subject for a different day. I'm going to share with you a very brief outline of the Parsha, and then we're going to dive into some things that I found particularly compelling. So the Parsha starts with Sarah's death, and Abraham purchases a burial plot, which has great significance in terms of our attachment to the land. And Abraham also sends his emissary to fetch a wife for Isaac. And we have the scene of this person coming upon Rebecca at the well. And it's really quite a beautiful scene. This is an important piece of the Parsha. So we have Rebecca's family agreeing to the betrothal of Rebecca with Isaac. She agrees to travel to a land she does not know. This might sound familiar. It's a reprise of the Abraham story from Lech Lecha. She agrees to travel and go to become Isaac's wife, and she marries Isaac. And there's this beautiful passage that indicates that they really loved one another. It's just quite lovely. And then the Parsha ends with a list of all of Abraham's descendants, including his descendants from his various concubines, and his death and burial. And Isaac and Ishmael come together and bury him together. So that's the outline. I got really curious about how Isaac managed and became really enchanted by a midrash that I read about, in which Isaac as an adult meets up with Hagar, Ishmael's mother. And she asks him how he's managed after all the trauma in his life. And he responds that he's spent a lot of time outside, alone, that he wondered and wandered and searched. So basically, she is marveling that he seems to be kind of together, composed, equanimous, one might say. So today we're going to look at the midah or soul trait or character trait of equanimity. And we'll look at what it is and what it isn't. And we'll learn from Isaac about how to achieve some measure of equanimity for ourselves. And we will circle back and I'll give you a little bit more meat on the bones of this little midrash, which I found so fascinating. So equanimity, it is described in a couple of three different Hebrew phrases, which I will do my best to pronounce correctly. Menuchat hanefesh, which means calmness of the soul. Yeshuv ha-da'at, which means a settled mind. And shalva, which means serenity. So equanimity really is an ability to face any situation that arises without being moved from a centered, settled self. Alan Marinus describes equanimity as a quality of being centered in yourself, though at the same time being exquisitely sensitive to the forces that are at work all around, or else you will be vulnerable to being tossed around by the sorts of unexpected waves that crash in on every life. He goes on to explain that it is not a numbness. You still feel all the ups and downs and the full range of emotions, but you stay awake to the experience from an undisturbed place. You know, early in my career, I did a lot of parent education work, parent guidance work, particularly with parents of teenagers. And I used to say the teenager is like the person on a roller coaster, the ups and downs and all around. You've got to be the person standing on the ground, the touchstone that isn't moving. And that's kind of another metaphor for equanimity. It's that touchstone. A very common metaphor for equanimity has to do with riding a surfboard in a roiling ocean. It takes a really strong inner core to be able to stay upright on a surfboard in the waves. You've got to tighten those abdominal muscles and use every tool that you have to stay balanced. And equanimity also takes a strong inner core. It's a different kind of inner core. We need to be fully in our bodies to know what's going on, to ride the ups and downs in our lives. And we need that strong sense of who we are to feel really centered and know ourselves. So in both cases, if you're riding a surfboard or if you're wanting to just have equanimity in your life, we need to be able to be in balance between being relaxed and calm while fully paying attention to what's crashing in around us, be they waves of water or waves of emotion or actions that are happening around us. So equanimity can be really tricky. Sometimes when things in our life get really tough, we may have a stance that looks like we're calm, and it looks like, we've got it together, but really what we've done is sort of checked out. This distancing ourselves and no longer caring is not equanimity. That can be referred to as our near enemy. So I'm going to take a step back here. Most, if not all, character traits have opposites. It's the enemy of the trait. So with equanimity, the enemy would be a lot of anxiety, because the equanimity is calm, staying calm, and the anxiety we know is not. The enemy of a trait doesn't look like the trait, so it's kind of obvious that it's the enemy. The near enemy, however, looks like the trait. So being numb or not caring or sort of mentally checking out can look like equanimity, but it isn't. With equanimity, we still really care. We still engage. We just aren't buffeted by the waves as they hit us. So I hope that's kind of clear. Sylvia Boorstein, another one of the teachers that I really rely on, teaches that to perfect equanimity, we need to accept every experience into our awareness. And she states, and I quote here, "When my mind greets all moments with equal respect, it maintains stature enough to see that causal connections set every experience into its lawful time and place, that everything is always, breathtakingly, the only way it can be. My heart resting in equanimity can respond with compassion." So now let's turn back to Isaac and see what we can learn from him about equanimity. So back to that Midrash, his encounter with Hagar. According to the Midrash, Isaac responds to Hagar's inquiry about how he is with, "Didn't Ishmael tell you? We buried our father Abraham together in Machpelah. I told him everything there, everything that happened on Mount Moriah." And then in the Midrash, he recounts all that happened with that whole experience. "Abraham went home after that, but I had to get away." Then Hagar asks, "Where have you been? How did you do it? After all those things you faced in your life." Now remember, he had the whole experience of almost being sacrificed by his father, and then his mother, whom he adored, died. So he was really left bereft. And Ishmael, who he played with as a child, was sent away, and Hagar was sent away. So Hagar says, "After all those things you faced in your life, how did your soul become whole again?" How did your soul become whole again? And Isaac responded, "I studied, I prayed, I spent time outside, I spent time alone, I wondered and I wandered, and I searched." So Rashi, the commentator from the Middle Ages, describes that scene when Isaac goes out into the field and then he looks up and he sees Rebecca approaching for the first time. Rashi says that he wasn't just wandering around in the field aimlessly. He was out in the field meditating and praying. And the description that Rashi gave sounds to me like he was practicing what I've been taught is a practice called Hitbodedut. Hitbodedut is this practice of going out into nature and just out loud pouring your heart out. You're pouring your heart out to God, or you're pouring your heart out to the trees or whatever, but you're pouring your heart out. And it can be very cathartic. And so there was a lot going on here for Isaac. And I think that what's really happening in this parsha is that we are seeing Isaac's spiritual journey, and we're getting lessons as to how he developed equanimity and resilience. He studies, he developed a practice of being in nature, he meditated, he prayed, and I really imagine that this practice of Hitbodedut, where he speaks his truth to God, likely involved a lot of yelling and screaming and questioning. And he took his time. So Isaac's development of equanimity does not smooth over his past experiences or lead him to a future without pain, trial, or suffering. Rather, it's the practice of equanimity as a constant journey and spiritual exercise that brings understanding and even peace to him, so that he is then capable of really loving Rebecca. So I would like us to now move into our meditation time. So I invite you to adjust your seat and check your posture. You want to sit up nice and straight. That great balance between relaxed and alert. And let's take a couple of cleansing breaths. And I'm going to give you some instructions for a practice that I hope will be a way for you to approach equanimity. So in our silent time today, I'd like you to consider noticing whatever arises and name it. Allow it and accept it. And then take a breath. And then note the next thing that arises. And simply keep doing this. And the naming can be very simple. It can be, oh, a thought, or a sensation, or emotion. And if you'd like, you can also note how it lands, pleasant, or unpleasant, or neutral. So the way to stay equanimous is to acknowledge and accept what is, rather than to relive the story of the thought, the sensation, or the emotion. So see if this is helpful for you. And if it is, terrific. And if it's not, don't do it. So I invite you to begin to deepen your breath. Slowly and gently begin to bring your attention outward. And as you are coming back to the room, I am going to read one of my favorite little poems. This is The Little Duck by Donald Babcock. We are now ready to look at something pretty special. It is a duck riding the ocean 100 feet beyond the surf, and he cuddles in the swells. There is a big heaving in the Atlantic, and he is part of it. He can rest while the Atlantic heaves because he rests in the Atlantic. Probably he doesn't know how large the ocean is, and neither do you. But he realizes it. And what does he do, I ask you? He sits down in it. He reposes in the immediate as if it were infinity, which it is. That is religion, and the duck has it. I like the little duck. He doesn't know much, but he has religion. So before I turn off the recording and we move to our discussion, there are two things I want to say. One is another little gem from Sylvia Boorstein, who says, meet every moment as a friend. I think that's another good cue for enhancing equanimity. And the other thing is my reminder that we will be saying Kaddish today after our discussion. So I think that we have enough people on the call so that if people need to head out, we'll still have a minyan. Okay, and with that, we will turn off the recording.